There were no doctors, and not enough coffins. When the flu spread uncontrollably, the healthcare system collapsed within weeks. Hospitals, already strained by the war, filled up rapidly. Beds ran out, medicines became scarce, and many patients were treated in hallways, stairwells, and even outdoors. Schools were closed and turned into improvised wards. Churches became places of care for the sick, and sports gyms were lined with endless rows of simple beds. Doctors and nurses worked to exhaustion, often sleeping only a few hours a night, fully aware that they themselves could be the next to fall ill. Some wrote farewell letters before starting their shifts. In everyday city life, the sound of ambulances mixed with the silence of closed homes. Death became so frequent that it no longer caused immediate shock. A little-known detail is that in many regions there weren't even enough people to bury the dead, and ordinary volunteers had to take on that task. The greatest fear was not just falling ill, but realizing that the very structure that sustained life in society was collapsing before everyone's eyes. Masks, isolation, and a great deal of denial. As the number of deaths increased, governments and local authorities began to impose containment measures. Cloth masks became mandatory in some cities, public gatherings were banned, and schools remained closed for months. For part of the population, these decisions seemed necessary. For others, they were seen as exaggerations or threats to personal freedom. In daily life, simple gestures took on new meanings. Coughing in public drew fearful looks. Handshakes were avoided. Shopkeepers feared bankruptcy. Workers feared losing their livelihoods. And many chose to ignore symptoms in order to keep their routines. Protests against mask use emerged, and rumors spread as fast as the virus itself. History is surprising in showing that misinformation is not a modern phenomenon. Even in 1918, rumors and false cures circulated by word of mouth. Meanwhile, the virus kept advancing, indifferent to human debates, taking advantage of every gap left by resistance to change. In just a few weeks, the world lost millions. The peak of the pandemic was fast, intense, and devastating. In a short period of time, almost every family was touched by loss. Entire cities entered a state of silent mourning. Factories reduced operations, transportation emptied, and commerce functioned only partially. In many places, the most constant sounds were sirens and church bells. It is estimated that more than 50 million people died worldwide, a number still difficult to comprehend today. A striking historical detail is that in some countries, life expectancy dropped dramatically in just 1 year, something nearly unprecedented. Daily life turned into a sequence of farewells. Children lost parents. Parents lost children. Entire communities vanished. Death ceased to be distant and became part of the daily landscape. Even so, life went on, driven by an almost instinctive need to survive. It didn't end with a cure, it simply faded away. After months of suffering, there was no grand announcement, no celebration marking the end of the pandemic. Gradually, almost without people noticing, cases began to decline. The virus mutated, became less aggressive, and lost strength. Hospitals emptied, masks were abandoned, and streets slowly regained movement. The return to normal life happened quietly, burdened by exhaustion and trauma. Many families chose not to talk about what they had endured. Grief was processed in silence. In everyday life, the urgency to rebuild the economy and resume routines outweighed the desire to deeply understand what had happened. The pandemic disappeared from headlines and entered the private memory of those who lived through it. The world moved forward, but deeply marked by an experience few wanted to relive or remember. What if this wasn't the end, but a warning? The Spanish flu left clear lessons about the importance of information, cooperation, and collective responsibility. Still, as decades passed, it was gradually forgotten, treated as a distant episode from an old world. Humanity believed that modern science would prevent something similar from happening again. A century later, another pandemic showed that this confidence may have been excessive. By revisiting 1918, we are not just observing the past, but facing an uncomfortable mirror. The same doubts, the same fears, the same difficult choices reappear. History shows that progress does not eliminate human vulnerability. It only changes the way we deal with it. Understanding what happened in 1918 is recognizing that the past is still alive, influencing decisions in the present and shaping the future. If this story is making you reflect on the world we live in today, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling us which part has impacted you the most so far. The deadliest pandemic in history began, like a simple flu. In early 1918, the world seemed to breathe cautiously, but also with hope. After years of war, people tried to return to small routines, going to work, walking the streets, sitting in cafes, planning for the future. Coughs and fevers caused no alarm. The flu was common, almost inevitable in the colder months. Newspapers devoted only a few lines to local outbreaks, always treated as passing waves of illness. Doctors prescribed rest, hot teas, and patience. In homes, families cared for the sick without real fear. Daily life moved quickly, as if the world wanted to make up for time lost to war. What no one realized was that a new virus was spreading silently, learning how to move from body to body. It arrived not with spectacle, but with discretion. Every handshake, every close conversation, every enclosed space became an invitation. The danger was not in what seemed strange, but in what felt far too familiar. This was the most deceptive moment of all, when nothing seemed wrong, yet everything was already changing. War helped spread something far worse than bullets. In a world connected by railways, ships, and military marches, the virus found the perfect path. Young, healthy soldiers were gathered in large camps, trained together, and transported en masse to different countries. They shared cramped quarters, meals, songs, and fatigue. When one fell ill, dozens were already infected. War demanded speed, not caution. Reporting outbreaks was seen as a sign of weakness. So many cases were ignored or minimized. The virus crossed oceans hidden in the breath of those who showed no severe symptoms. In the daily life of port cities, sailors disembarked, workers unloaded goods, families received letters and visitors. Everything seemed normal. A key historical curiosity is that the pandemic's advance was accelerated not by negligence, but by strategy. Maintaining an appearance of strength came at a high cost. While leaders focused on visible battles, an invisible war advanced without resistance. What if the most famous name of the pandemic is a lie? The so-called Spanish flu did not begin in Spain, but it was there that it gained a voice. Because the country was not directly involved in the conflict, its press was free to report what was happening. Spanish newspapers openly described an aggressive flu affecting thousands, including public figures. In other countries, these same reports were suppressed. To the rest of the world, it seemed the disease originated in Spain. The name spread faster than the truth. This seemingly small detail had real consequences. By associating the problem with a specific place, it created a false sense of distance. People believed it was something external, far from their homes. In daily life, this delayed reactions and increased exposure. The pandemic received the wrong label, and with it came the illusion of safety. The virus, indifferent to names and borders, continued to advance in silence. people were healthy in the morning and dead by nightfall. When the virus changed, the world realized too late. Unlike other known flus, this one struck young, strong, active people with force. Workers, soldiers, parents fell ill suddenly. Within hours, fever spiked, breathing became labored, and lungs began to fail. To those watching, it seemed impossible to understand. How could someone walking normally in the morning be near death by evening? Doctors were baffled. Known treatments did not work. The body itself seemed to turn against itself. In ordinary homes, scenes of desperation repeated. Families improvised care. Children watched adults without understanding what was happening. A striking historical surprise is that many healthcare professionals reported they had never seen anything like it. Daily life became marked by absolute uncertainty. There was no way to predict who would survive. A parade killed thousands without a single shot being fired. In an attempt to keep morale high, authorities chose to proceed with large public events. Streets filled with people, music, and flags. There was a collective sense of relief, as if normal life had finally returned. A few days later, hospitals were overwhelmed. Beds ran out quickly. Healthcare workers collapsed physically and emotionally. What began as celebration ended in mass mourning. The city's daily life changed brutally. Streets once crowded became empty. Homes were marked by silence. This decision, made in the name of hope, became one of the clearest examples of how ignoring warnings can amplify tragedy. History shows that sometimes the danger does not come from the unknown, but from the insistence on acting as if nothing has changed. If this story made you feel the weight of the past and realize how it still echoes in the present, don't let that reflection end here. Subscribe to the channel to keep traveling through moments that shape the world as it is today. And in the comments, tell us, which detail impacted you the most? The silence, the choices, or the warning that was ignored?